After the market crash in October, many economists were revising their forecasts down and looking for a recession in 1988. Well, now there aren't so many doing that this time around, but they are talking about a slowdown in the economy come next year. A slowdown that they say will at least avoid a recession for 1988, but doesn't necessarily rule one out for 1989. In New York, Neil Cavuto for the Nightly Business Report.
White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater today said the dollar seems to have stabilized against foreign currencies, but that didn't keep the greenback from moving slightly lower. For the third straight day, the dollar closed at a new post-war low against the Japanese yen in New York after closing unchanged in Tokyo. But with trading this week in the currency markets only about 10% of normal, some traders say the dollar's real test won't come until next week. Well, stock market passed its test today with flying colors as the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose more than 23 points. With the details, here's Paul.
Following 3 consecutive losing sessions, which sent the Dow Industrial Average down 78 3/4 points, the market opened with a nice rally this morning, which was in large measure a technical rebound, but it was also helped along by a steadier U.S. dollar and an upturn in bond prices after the government reported that big 1.7% drop in November leading economic indicators. By 11 a.m., the Dow had pushed steadily higher to post just over a 24.5-point gain, while advancing stocks established a solid 9-4 lead over losers. The market held its early gains nicely during mid-session as bargain buyers helped support prices, while another plus was the fact that stock futures were at considerable premiums to their underlying stocks. At 1 p.m., the industrial average was still up nearly 21.5 points, with 10 gainers for every 5 losers. The market remained firm in mid-afternoon as year-end tax selling was no longer putting much downward pressure on prices, while a few institutions were doing enough cautious buying to keep the upturn alive. At 3 p.m., the Dow was up almost 21 3/4 points. During the final hour, the usual year-end cross-currents had little impact on the market as persistent bargain hunting enabled the Dow Industrial Average to move to a closing gain of 23.21 at 1950.10. We're now about 55 points above where we started the year. A theoretical high today just above 1966, the low down around 1926. Trading volume today moved up considerably to 149.2 million shares, and up volume was better than 3 times down volume. The Dow Transport Index up nearly 6 3/4 points. Utilities up about 1.125. Dow 65 up nearly 7.5 points. The closing tick, however, a minus 70, indicating that the market was easing a little bit at the final bell. Standard & Poor's 500 up just over 3 1/4, almost a 4-point gain on the 400. Standard & Poor's 100 up nearly 3.5, and the Commodity Research Bureau March Index lost 0.45. New York Stock Exchange Index a 1 2/3 point gain. NASDAQ Index up nicely, nearly 4 1/4 points. Value Line up over 2 points, and the Wilshire 5000 gained just over 30.5 points. The bond market was elevated by today's report of that big 1.7% drop in the November leading indicators, as well as by the news that last month's housing starts fell 1.2%. These signs, of course, suggest an easing in the economy and less upward pressure on interest rates. Since most of the institutions have already closed their books for the year, however, corporates and municipals gained only 8 1/4 on light volume, and as we now see, the long Treasury bond was up 10/32. The or I should say the Shearson Lehman long Treasury bond index up just over 3.5 points. And finally, Fed funds closed at 6.5% low throughout most of the day as the Federal Reserve was quite accommodating. I'll be back shortly to show you where the action was on Wall Street today.
On the precious metals markets today, gold, platinum, and silver prices fell, platinum plunging below $500 an ounce. On the New York currency markets, the dollar was mixed against major foreign currencies, but again fell to record lows against the mark and yen in light trading. And oil prices slipped in New York after rising in London. Two more regional banks today announced plans to take write-offs against earnings because of possible problems with loans to third world nations. Bank of New England said it will make a special $90 million provision for those loans in the current quarter, while North Carolina's First Wachovia Corporation said it will make a similar provision of just over $31 million. First Wachovia said it took the action because of developments of recent months affecting third world debt. One of the most recent developments in third world debt is Mexico's new debt swapping plan, offering its lenders the chance to exchange some of their existing loans for new loans with partial U.S. backing. But as Washington correspondent Bob Friedman reports, the Mexican plan may not be the model for other Latin American debtors.
The new debt plan for Mexico will be watched closely by banks with Latin American debt and by other debtor nations. Mexico has agreed to buy U.S. bonds with dollars and use those bonds as collateral for new Mexican bonds issued at a discount to its lender banks. Argentina's ambassador to the U.S. today called the Mexican plan interesting, but doubts it can work for his nation.
The resources of Mexico to buy such a debt are better than ours in the question of reserves at the moment.
The Mexican debt plan may not be applicable to other third world nations, but experts on the region say the package is a major admission by the Reagan administration that some debt will never be paid back, and that sets the stage for other countries to seek debt forgiveness.
What the countries will be looking for will be to exchange a good portion of their debt owed to the commercial banks for securities or bonds, which will be swapped at a very deep discount, so that their outstanding obligations will be reduced considerably.
Large banks, say experts, are expected to go along with new initiatives to repay a discounted portion of the Latin American debt rather than write it all off as some smaller banks have. Still, some bankers say that the new bonds, like the ones to be offered by Mexico, will have to carry a reasonable rate of return in exchange for the long-term risk.
It may well be that all of the bids will be for a percentage that is not quite as low as 50%, but more perhaps 60, perhaps 70. That will be a market answer to this mechanism.
Even if this new Mexican initiative cannot be extended to other banks and other debtor nations, the Treasury Department says it hopes the message will go out to debtors and creditors that they too should continue to work together to create new financing packages. In Washington, Bob Friedman for the Nightly Business Report.
Western Union has passed another hurdle in its struggle to stay solvent. The telecommunications firm says holders of 2/3 of its debt securities have agreed to exchange their securities in response to its offer. With that accomplished, Western Union says it is now set to go ahead with a planned restructuring, which involves the merger of Western Union into its telegraph company subsidiary. The Knight Ridder and Gannett newspaper chains have lost their first round in their attempt to combine their money-losing Detroit newspapers, the Free Press and the Detroit News. A Justice Department administrative law judge today recommended that the newspapers not be allowed to be jointly operated. The two companies have been seeking permission to do that since April of last year, saying that the Detroit economy can no longer support two profitable newspapers. A final decision is still up to Attorney General Edwin Meese, but Knight Ridder has said it will close or sell the Free Press if today's recommendation is upheld. Will anyone get rid of any stock on the news?
They got rid of a little stock, I guess. It was down 7/8 at 41 1/4, slightly negative imprint there. However, the Dow Jones Industrial Average did very well today, coming back after about 78 points of loss over the previous 3 sessions, almost a 23 1/4 point gain right to the 1950 level, and more than twice as many issues closing higher than lower, 4 new highs for the year, 28 new lows. Topping the active list on nearly 2 million shares, Bankers Trust up 1 5/8 in a continuing positive reaction to the new Mexican debt plan, and then a low-priced issue of Prudential Realty Trust at 15/16 no change, followed by Chemical New York Preferred C stock up 1/4. Southern California Edison also gained 1/4, and Citicorp was up 1/2. American Express gained 5/8. It goes ex-dividend next Monday by 19 cents a share. No change in Navistar. Exxon moved up 1/2. General Electric a 7/8 point gain. 10th in big board volume. Bank America at 7 edged up 1/8. American Telephone was a 7/8 point gainer today, and Allegis gained 1 1/4. Today, Allegis completed the sale of its Hertz rent-a-car division to Park Ridge Corporation for $1.3 billion. American Cyanamid moved up 1 full point. The company received FDA approval to market its leukemia drug called Novantrone. Digital Equipment up 3 points after getting a buy recommendation from Solomon Brothers. Eastman Kodak up 1 3/4. Yesterday, the FTC approved the company's combination photo finishing plants with those of Fuqua Corporation. IBM was up 7/8 today, and Merck gained 3 points. It received FDA approval for its high blood pressure drug called Prinivol, I believe it is. In the big gainer column, FGIC Corp up 1 1/8. GE Capital Corporation, which already owns 23%, wants to buy another 15%, bringing its total ownership to 38%. And for this 15%, it's willing to pay $16.50 a share. DynCorp moving up 1 3/8. The company's chairman has formed an investment group that will bid $23.25 to take over the company. Of that, $15.75 is cash and the rest in debt and preferred stock. Toys R Us up 2 5/8. Speculation on the street that the company had much better than expected Christmas sales. Morton Thiokol down 1 1/2 yesterday. The company had a major explosion in one of its MX missile plants, killed 5 of its employees, and of course the week before that had some problems with the shuttle booster rocket, and now the shuttle program is going to be delayed. Manufacturers Hanover off a 1.58. The only news I saw today is that the company is going to, or it did today, sell off 20% of its Portuguese subsidiary. Some analysts, however, feel that Manny Hanny isn't going to benefit that much by the Mexican debt plan. Carper Technology nailed for a 1 7/8 point loss, but no news coming from the company. Over in the American exchange, a gain of 2.07 in the index, trading volume up 5 million shares from yesterday's pace, and advancers led decliners by nearly a 3-2 margin. Topping the active list on a 750,000 shares, Lorimar Telepictures up 1/2. Speculation on the street that oilman Marvin Davis is accumulating the shares. Home Shopping Net showed no change. Wang B edging up 1/8, as did Conquest Exploration, and Ecogen, fifth in volume, up 3/8. TEC Incorporated, which makes peripheral parts for computers, up 1.5. We weren't able to get through to a corporate officer. Datarex Systems down 1 point. We did talk to a company official, and he said no specific news today. NASDAQ trading a gain of 4.17 in the index. Trading volume up almost 33 million shares from yesterday's pace, and about 14 stocks up for every 10 down. 100 index gaining 5.88. Apple Computer topped the active list, moving into higher ground. A 1.25 gain there. High-tech's popular again. Intel moved up 3/4. Genentech backed off 3/8, however. Microsoft was up 1.25, and Lotus Development a 1 3/8 point gain. Sun Microsystems edged up 3/4. Telecommunications up 1.25, and Seagate gained 1/4. Ashton Tate up 1 1/8. 10th in NASDAQ volume. Price Company up 1 3/4. St. Paul Company's up 2 points. A federal judge is recommending that Allegheny Corp be allowed to increase its ownership in St. Paul from 8% to 20%. Others say that Allegheny has a secret plan to take complete control. Ogilvy Group was up 3/4, mentioned favorably in a New York Times article today. Finally, Flextronics moving down a full point. Big percentage loss. The company said it sees lower third-quarter earnings. That's our Wall Street wrap-up. Dean?
Thanks, Paul. Public Service Company of New Hampshire today moved closer to becoming the first major utility to seek bankruptcy protection since the Great Depression, as a second group of creditors took steps to attach its property. A spokesman for the firm says the move will cloud the company's bailout efforts, but should not stop it from proceeding with its own debt restructuring plan. Meanwhile, another utility having financial problems because of a nuclear plant, Gulf States Utilities, today went to court to overturn a recent ruling by the Louisiana Public Service Commission. That ruling prevents Gulf States from passing along virtually any costs associated with its Riverbend nuclear plant. Well, investors' problems with nuclear power began in 1983 when the Washington Public Power Supply System, better known as WHOOPS, defaulted on $2.25 billion worth of bonds. The default was the largest ever in the municipal bond market, and while years have gone by, legal efforts to recover the money lost by WHOOPS investors are now in high gear, as Deni Yamauchi reports.
It's been 4 years since the construction stopped here and the litigation began. Since then, the nation's largest security fraud case, known as WHOOPS, has grown increasingly more complex. There are more than 24 separate lawsuits now around the nation. The largest of them, MDL 551, now involves over 24,000 bondholders asking for $1.5 billion.
It is one of the largest and probably most complicated federal cases.
That largest case, known as MDL 551, involves primary plaintiffs Chemical Bank and investors who bought bonds for construction of WHOOPS Plants 4 and 5. They filed against underwriters and 88 utilities. But earlier this year, underwriters offered a preliminary $92 million settlement. A final settlement offer must be reviewed by bondholders and approved by a judge. Meanwhile, preparations for the MDL 551 court trial have been staggering.
It's estimated that over 200 million pages of documents were produced.
The large scope of the trial will demand a special courtroom to handle up to 100 attorneys. The most likely site will be a specially constructed space at the Tucson Ramada Inn as a change of venue away from Washington State. But the case may not be argued in Tucson at all if all the parties are able to reach settlement before next September. They're not close now, but the recent underwriter's offer brought some hope.
We think it's an important development, and it may lead to other settlements.
It will be many, many months and maybe over a year or maybe a year and a half before we know whether that settlement will actually pass muster.
Meanwhile, the sale of WHOOPS 4 and 5 bonds still goes on. About a third of the original bondholders have sold, taking what they can. But others are buying the bonds, even though they can't join the current large lawsuit.
They're selling for about 8 to 9 cents on the dollar, and that I feel the bondholders will ultimately recover a sum greater than that.
New bondholders hope they can sell this WHOOPS 4 and 5 equipment overseas, and that other untapped resources may net them a few more cents on the dollar. And since Whoops bonds, once AA rated, are now selling so low, they figure they just can't lose. In Satsupp, Washington, Deni Yamauchi for the Nightly Business Report.
In business notes, the St. Louis toy maker Toys Plus said that its 8 largest creditors have filed a petition in U.S. bankruptcy court trying to force the firm into bankruptcy. Toys Plus said the creditors are seeking about $3 million. The chairman of Kmart's executive and finance committees, Robert Dewar, will retire January 31st after 38 years with the retailing giant. The firm has not yet named a replacement. And the Kuwait Investment Office said it has raised its stake in British Petroleum to more than 18%. The Arab nation now holds more than 1 billion BP shares. Coming up, Adam Smith says U.S. automakers have a disproportionate influence on the U.S. government. The General Accounting Office, Congress's investigative arm, today blasted what it called the government's antiquated accounting systems. A draft report from the GAO says accounting weaknesses are widespread throughout the government, resulting in the waste of billions of tax dollars. Specifically, the report says bookkeeping errors may have resulted in underpayments to Social Security recipients, while the Pentagon's basic lack of internal controls may have allowed explosives to fall into the hands of extremists. President Reagan today signed into law a measure that calls for spending $20 billion over the next 5 years to upgrade the nation's aviation system. More than a third of that amount is earmarked for airport improvement and noise reduction projects, with another $5 billion set aside for modernizing the air traffic control system. The bill also requires the Federal Aviation Administration to hire an additional 1,000 air traffic controllers by next October. Responding to government pressure, makers of all-terrain vehicles today agreed to halt all sales of 3-wheel all-terrain machines and to post warning labels on all 4-wheel vehicles. The agreement settles a threatened lawsuit by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which contended that ATVs are imminently hazardous consumer products. ATVs have been blamed for more than 900 deaths since 1982, with 3-wheel vehicles implicated in most of those incidents. In tonight's commentary, author Adam Smith, host of the PBS television program Adam Smith's Money World, calls for an end to U.S. automakers' protectionist demands.
7 years ago, Detroit was on the ropes. The Japanese were selling cars here as if they had invented them. Detroit said the problem was the costs were so much cheaper in Japan. The rest of us knew that that was not the only problem. You couldn't buy a Detroit car that was built on a Monday, a Friday, or during deer hunting season because some of the parts might be on backwards or missing altogether, and the cars didn't say, I was built on a Friday, don't buy me. We had a Chrysler Volare, and the hood would fly open, and sometimes it wouldn't start 2 days out of 3. Later I read in Lee Iacocca's autobiography that they never finished the engineering on that car before they pushed it out the door. And you remember Ford's Pinto was very cute, but it burst into flame, and so on. Anyway, Detroit went to Washington and said, give us a quota. The Japanese agreed to a, quote, voluntary agreement, quote, and they limited their shipments to America. That gave Detroit room to boost the prices. Originally, Detroit said, we need 2 to 3 years. After that, they said, let the Japanese make the cars here. The Japanese did. After that, Detroit said, the dollar's too high. Well, the dollar has now gone from 220 yen to 180 to 160, even to below 130. And that means their cost has doubled and the Toyotas and Hondas arrive here costing double. Isn't that enough? No, Detroit wants to continue the quota or a cap on Japan's market share. Isn't enough enough? The quotas have already cost Americans $17 billion. That's a couple of $100 on each car. The American automakers have so much cash, they don't know what to do with it all. And this is the right moment, because if we ever have a recession or the dollar turns around and goes up, we'll never get rid of the quota. So I say, enough. I'm Adam Smith.
Recapping tonight's top stories, the New York Stock Exchange study blasts financial futures, saying action is needed to keep them from undermining confidence in the financial markets.
Investors don't seem to have lost confidence in the stock market as the Dow Jones Industrial Average climbs nearly 23.25 points to close at 1950.10.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, we'll close out the trading week and the trading year by consulting with market monitor Bob Nicholson. And now with tonight's last word, here's Paul.
Well, you can tell that the Japanese Prime Minister will soon be visiting Washington when our government officials take a break from Japan bashing and instead start praising Japan for boosting its defense spending. That's exactly what's happened today, as Defense Secretary Frank Carlucci commended Japan for increasing its defense budget to $30 billion. Carlucci added that by providing $2.5 billion for the support of the U.S. military in Japan, Japan provides the best support for U.S. troops of any ally. Now, if we can only convince Japan to pick up some of the cost of our free escort service in the Persian Gulf.
That's it for this edition of the Nightly Business Report for Wednesday, December 30th. For all of us, good night.
The Nightly Business Report is made possible by Kidder Peabody. Our over 120 years of investment experience is an arch to build upon, serving the financial needs of individuals, corporations, and governments. Kidder Peabody, professionalism worldwide. By Digital Equipment Corporation, with its new generation of VAX family computers, connecting headquarters, branch offices, production and research centers into a single integrated computing environment. Digital has it now. And public television stations across the nation. For a transcript of this program, please send $3 check or money order to NBR Transcripts, P.O. Box 12724, Overland Park, Kansas 66212. Please include the date of the broadcast. This broadcast of the Nightly Business Report on WLIW is made possible by an underwriting grant from New York Muni Fund, providing New Yorkers triple tax-free income and unlimited checking.
Hello, I'm Mark Russell. A funny thing happened to us on the way to 1988. What was it? 1987. Not a bad year as funny years go. A lot funnier than 1986. A whole lot funnier than 1932. Yes, sir, right up there with the hilarious 1066. It's the best of the Mark Russell 1987 comedy specials on public television.
Tonight at 10:30 on WLIW.
In the snowy mountains of Montana and the vast deserts of the West, a romantic slice of the national past lives in the hoofbeats of America's wild horses. But for how long? A federal roundup has left 10,000 once wild horses languishing in bleak concentration camps. Are they costly parasites or precious remnants of the national past? America's wild horses, next time on Nature.
Friday at 8 p.m. on WLIW.
Maricela, a refugee from the violence in El Salvador, haunted by her past and struggling to find her place in a new world.
I'm not going to the movies with a Mexican.
It must be so rough.
All I have to do is pick up the phone and call immigration, and bang, you're out of here.
Linda Lavin in Maricela on Wonderworks.
Sunday at 6 p.m. on WLIW.
Hi, I'm Sam Francis, General Manager of WLIW Channel 21. From our family to your family, we'd like to wish you Happy Holidays!
You're watching New York's leading public television station. Viewer-supported WLIW.